I think part of the backlash on failure has been Mark Zuckerberg's move fast and break things. It's been a bit sort of, we all just have to like jump in and break things, and this whole kind of slightly macho Silicon Valley type of culture. And I really liked the antithesis to that, which is...
Hello and welcome to Psychology in the Wild. I'm Dr. Gemma Lee Roberts.
And I'm Erin Shrimpton.
And this is the podcast where we try to make sense of everyday chaos. Erin, how are you?
I am not too bad. How are you? And what is wild this week?
What is wild? Well, summer holidays are still continuing. So I feel like I might have done enough about how wild that is in my world. But the lack of routine is definitely taking its toll over here. I'm half absolutely loving it and not having anything in particular to get up for, or, you know, the days we don't have plans. But half of me can see that I think we're starting to lose it slightly over here. What's been wild your end?
Oh, exactly the same. I mean, in some ways, I absolutely love the anti-routine of it all, where, you know, it's just go with the flow. But that always comes back to bite you, doesn't it? You know, and people are just, including myself, just not with it in getting things done, in knowing what's happening next. It tends to kind of, the days just tend to kind of mash up into one, and every day has a different challenge. And yeah, so I am actually kind of looking forward to getting back to the routine of it all.
It's a funny one. It's a funny bite. Oh, can I give you another wild thing as well?
Yeah.
So a bit more interesting. I was in Paris on the weekend, so I was away.
Yes. Tell me, I've been meaning to ask. How was it?
Really, really, really good fun. So I went away with two friends just for 2 nights, so Friday and Saturday night. But we had a very early start on Friday on the Eurostar, and a very late get home on the Sunday. So it's kind of it felt lengthy, and I can safely say it was definitely wild. We did lots of sightseeing, did lots of champagne drinking, a little bit of Moulin Rouge, a little bit of Eiffel Tower, like amazing things. So it was wonderful, but I can safely say I'm a little bit jaded. So maybe take that into account when we're chatting today. It might be a little bit slower than usual, but it was good fun and totally worth it.
I was just going to say, I think those things, yes, even though you always kind of feel the downside of them afterwards, it's probably worth it, wasn't it?
100%.
You need a couple of days like that.
You need a couple of days like that every now and then, but then you also need at least a week to recover after that as well. Because the other thing is you come straight back into parenting. And even though Jake, my husband, was great when I was away, like kept everything, like honestly, they were totally fine without me. The kids do get quite upset when I'm away. So I'm kind of like, and then obviously I want to see them. I really miss them. So I'm desperate to get home and desperate to see them. But then obviously along with that comes the parenting as well. And I think when you're quite tired and quite jaded, that can be quite tricky. But I guess that's one of the benefits of being in summer holidays, because normally I'd be straight back into work and parenting as well. Whereas I'm not working so much during the holidays. So that's been quite a nice little treat for me, actually, doing stuff like that.
Are you enjoying it?
Yeah, yes, I am. And actually, yes. And when I say I'm not working, I am working. I'm just not doing things where I have to be at a set time. Other than us doing this podcast.
Yeah.
Other things I can be really flexible, so I can work around what I'm doing with the kids. So I can have like last minute plans with the kids, and I'm not rushing back for a meeting, or I'm not. So it's probably 1 day a week where I'm kind of working properly, and the rest is quite flexible. But that is actually a very good question, because it brings me on to my topic of the week and what I think we should be discussing, which is a bit nerve-wracking. It's a bit of a big one, I feel like.
Oh, go on.
So my topic of the week this week, which I think is going to relate to absolutely everyone listening to this podcast at one point or another, is failure. And how we manage failure, how we think about failure, how we deal with failure. And I feel like that's kind of been thrown into my life in quite a big way over the last few weeks. And The reason being, and I know I've talked a little bit about slowing down with work over summer, but there's actually been a fairly big reason for that as well, in that I made the huge decision to close down one of the businesses that I've been working on, the Mindset Matters Hub, which...
Wow. Okay.
Oh, I know. And I know that you know that I've kind of mentioned maybe I'll do that at some point.
You've talked about it. Yeah, we've talked about it. But go on. I haven't talked to you yet about actually making this call.
Yeah, it's been really hard. So the reason being, I kind of feel like I've been running two businesses. So Mindset Matters Hub, which I've been setting up, and my business, like my consulting business and the book and royalties and all of that jazz, kind of, and like going into organizations is kind of slightly different. And what that means is I'm spending a lot, I felt like I was spending a lot of time setting something up, something brand new up, when I've kind of already got a business there and I'm already known for the stuff that I do and the work that I do. And I'm kind of trying to build that up somewhere else with the intention that it'll be bigger than just me. Like it's not just going to be, the Mindset Matters Hub isn't just me. But it's cost a lot of money to do that. It takes a lot of time. There's a lot going into, or there was a lot going into marketing. I just stopped enjoying it. And I had two lots of accounts that I was running. So I had two lots of accountant meetings, and it got to the point where I wasn't enjoying it. It felt like I was spending a lot of time having the website designed and the subscription designed and the marketing meetings. Yeah. And I was spending less and less time doing what I'm actually good at, which is designing courses or resources or turning complicated psychology research or information into stuff that people can actually use. And it was really hard, really, really hard to let go of, because so much of me has gone into that, and so much of me identifies with the Mindset Matters Hub. And in all honesty, it has felt like a huge failure in terms of money. There's so much money that has been spent on that. Time. This has been a year now that I've been working. Yeah, not full time, but near enough full time on this. A lot
into it, yeah.
And also just being, and I know I shouldn't say this because I know it's silly even saying it, but even just being a bit embarrassed of, I feel like not being able to make it work, but then I have to kind of question that. I'm like, it's not that I couldn't, it's that I've got to, because I can keep going. And I think this is where we've got to be really careful with these things. Is there's that, in the psychology world, the idea of sunk cost. Like there's so much already gone into it, you just keep putting more and more and more into it because you don't want it to not work. And I think you've got to really challenge yourself on that sometimes. And I think the crux of it was, I've just started to really not enjoy it. I've started to not want to open emails of anything to do with it or to book those meetings. So yeah, it's all, and what I will say is it's not going completely. So the courses that have been created, the resources, that will all still be there. I'm just putting it in a different place, and it will be marketed in a different way. It'll be my name and my brand. It won't be something separate to me. So it's not a total waste. But yeah, it has felt genuinely, it's felt like a huge failure, and like having to tell people about it as well. Because obviously people are asking all the time what's happening, what's coming next, and people that care, and people that know me, or people that know me from the work world. It's been a really hard decision, but I felt amazing after I made the decision. And when I finally sent that email to the accountants being like, I'm going to be closing this business down, like what do we need to do? The relief has felt lovely.
So I think that's your answer in terms of knowing that it was the right thing to do, that feeling of relief. Because it's interesting, you describing it as a failure, because actually everything you've just said to me there, I'm going, actually, that sounds really sensible, like really, really sensible decision-making, following the right instincts that you have. You're following your own values, you're following what's important to you, which is all stuff that we always talk about here and outside of here as well. So actually, to me, that doesn't sound like a failure at all. That sounds like really good, instinctive, values-based decision-making. And also that you still have so much that you've learned from the whole experience, and lots of things that you can still use for the future of your original business. So I think one of the difficult things is with something like that, and, you know, any kind of entrepreneur, any startup who, you know, and somebody founding something, if you're telling all your friends and family, or you're putting stuff out on social media, it feels really visible, doesn't it? You know, you can't just, and that's the problem when you're starting, when you're taking a risk like that with something, you're going to be putting it out there, and you have to kind of put it out there before you know that it's going to succeed, or before you know that it's going to work, because that's the nature of it. So you have to then tolerate the discomfort of not knowing if it's going to work, and then the extreme discomfort of, as you say, the sort of the embarrassment or shame that comes with saying, actually, it hasn't worked. Whereas there's so many things in life that we do that nobody sees. And like, I think that's one of the things, you know, about failure and about talking about failure openly, that's why I feel, and we both feel that it's a really important thing to do, because so much of life's failures, so much of what people do in life that doesn't work gets brushed under the carpet, or, you know, you can quite easily hide it or not talk about it. And it's really important to make sure that everybody does know that there is not a human being on this planet who isn't failing in some capacity pretty much every day in some way, shape or form. You know, it's just that we don't necessarily see it all the time. So I think that's what's probably quite, you know, even more difficult in this scenario for you, which is, you know, it was something that you had to launch quite visibly, something that, you know, you put a lot into of yourself. And as you say, yeah, that's the other thing, like when it's something that kind of represents yourself, and it's not, you know, it's not just a product, because you are the product, then it feels more personal, doesn't it? So how did you work through some of those emotions that came with that?
Oh, that's a very good question.
Because do you know what I do? And I was thinking about this when when something hasn't worked out that I've been working on or something, and I know as a psychologist that this is not what I should do, but I'm the first to jump on the whole brush under the carpet bandwagon and just try and move on and not talk about it. Whereas actually, that's not what really we should do.
But I think there are stages. It's a bit like stages of grief in some ways, because I kind of knew it was coming. It's hopefully is, yeah. And it's a very good question. And I was thinking, as you asked that, you should probably ask my husband, Jake, how I deal with it, because I'm sure it comes out in my mood in the house, I'd imagine. And I do try my best to kind of keep, to be aware of why I'm behaving like I'm behaving, or know if there's something kind of going on that I'm not feeling great about. And I do my best to try and figure it out, but I can't always do that in the moment. So in terms of processing the emotion, it definitely feels like a loss. Actually, not so much now. Now I started talking about it, not so much. And I feel like that's probably one of the key things I'd say is don't go too long without talking about it, because it becomes, that's never a pleasant, it's never a pleasant experience when you've got to send a message to someone, or someone asks you in a conversation, oh, what's happening? I actually had that on the weekend, one of the girls I was with, and it's never pleasant kind of running through the reasons why. And then I kind of feel a little bit like I'm justifying it. I'm giving all the reasons of, why it's the right decision, but it's still hard. But I also feel like you've just got to do that, because if you don't do it, you're just hiding from it. And you're not really processing what's happened. So the first emotion was probably, I think I felt lots of emotions about this. I think I felt really sad that I think my initial response was, oh my God, I just can't make this work. And again, I'm not being defeatist about it, because I truly believe if I really, really wanted to carry on going down that route, I would have made it work. But I also had to think about the impact it's going to have on me, the impact it's going to have on my family. And the fact that, I'm just not enjoying it. And that's a really big part of my work now. I try and do work that I really enjoy and I really connect with. There's definitely been some anger in there for sure, because there's lots of things that didn't go to, lots of stuff is totally my fault. But lots of stuff kind of going in there that happened that in hindsight shouldn't have happened. It isn't all necessarily to do with me. There's definitely been some anger in there as well. I think it's that kind of the sadness bit of letting something go was the hardest part. But I just kept, exactly as you said, I kind of had a bit of a niggle for a while. And actually, it was Jake, because I work sometimes with Jake as well as some of the work that we do, my husband. And it was actually him that a while ago said, I just feel like your heart's not in this anymore. I feel like you're doing it, but I can see you've lost your spark. I can see, or it has lost its spark for you.
Yeah.
And I kind of had to acknowledge that. And there's an acceptance piece as well. So accepting, the things that were great about it, the things that weren't so great, things that went really well, things that didn't go so well, how my life's going to look now versus how it would, like, there was so much to process. And and the final motion, when I actually made the decision, was just total relief. Like, and actually I felt quite joyful. I feel like I've had a bit of a spring in my step since making the decision. And I do feel like a lot of that, it is really like a lot of that getting, like, coming to terms with that and making peace. I'm very good at mixing phrases, by the way. So coming to terms and making peace of that. A lot, just piece all together. Has been about, like, because I've been talking about it, and I don't enjoy talking about it, but then also it is also my job, because if anyone has ever seen anything, so I've got a newsletter on LinkedIn called Mindset Matters, and I talk about stuff like this all the time, like failure and resilience, and and I talk, this is the stuff I talk about, and I feel like it would be very disingenuous of me to not talk about the process, and not, because I always say it's really important to talk about the failure as you're going through it, because you want to tell your support system about it. It helps you process it. Also, it helps you move on, because once that decision's made and the world knows about it, you can move on and you can do the next thing. And I feel like we always hear these big failure stories when people have made a success. And it's, you hear stories and people, they're like, oh yeah, I created this amazing thing. But actually what people don't know is, 5 years prior to that, this other thing didn't go to plan, or I was at rock bottom, and I feel like partly we become more interested in people's stories as they do greater things. So, whilst we're languishing in things that haven't gone so well, maybe people aren't as interested in that story, potentially. But also, I do think that embarrassment and shame piece comes in, and we don't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
But it's so frustrating, because exactly as you say, most of us are dealing with a sense of failure fairly frequently.
Yeah.
So if we can share that with others, it means other people can talk about it as well. And other people don't have to feel embarrassed or upset or ashamed. Like, they can start to work through that process as well.
I think another reason we don't talk about it when you're in the messy middle of it is because we don't really have a framework for talking about it. Like, sometimes it can be really hard to make sense of it in that moment. One of the things that I constantly try and remind myself of is this is only a failure based on your own measure of success. So when you think, like, putting that in terms of the story that you've just told us, I would say, knowing you as well as I do, that your measure of success is when it comes to your business, is that you'll be working on something that brings you joy, that you get to use your strengths, that you get to collaborate with people, and that also obviously creates value financially and commercially for you. Obviously we all work because we need to put food on the table. But I think those other parts of work for you are equally as important as that. And so when you think about that business and you think about those measures of success, when you looked at it and you reviewed it, you realized it wasn't hitting that at all. It wasn't hitting those targets for me. And so I think actually it's not a failure at all to stop it, because in fact it just wasn't. It's only a failure, if actually would have been maybe a failure if you'd kept going with it, because it wasn't in any way meeting your criteria for, what success looks like for you day to day. So, and I kind of try and use that. I often find myself in, one of those spirals of, just even on day-to-day failures, or like recently I've been really sick because I got COVID in the middle of the summer, like a lot of people. It's been doing the rounds again. And it just meant that I had to down tools on so many things with work, but also here at home, with the family, and like not being, so I haven't been able to be as active and doing fun things with the kids in the way that I wanted to. And it's very hard not to internalize that as failure, essentially, because, it just feels like I'm just not doing what I set out to do, But I have to bring myself back to going, okay, well, first of all, that was out of my control. Second of all, my measure of success is a situation where, I am present. It might not be that I'm up and, dancing around the place because I'm a bit too sick, but, that I am around and I'm here with the kids, and I'm doing work that I enjoy, and I'm still doing all of those things. It just might be that I'm having to take it slower than I'd like, So I think it's important to remind yourself of that, as of, well, actually, what is the measure of success that I've set for myself here? Because it's very hard not to let external measures of success come into it all the time, because we're constantly looking, and nowadays with social media, it's very hard not to look out to the outside world and compare yourself to what is going on, what everybody else is doing. Probably like a broken record on this one, because I know that it's certainly something that impacts me, but it's not, it's really hard not to compare yourself to other people's measures of success. But you have to remember, set your own measure of success first of all, and then, okay, sometimes you're not going to meet it. Sometimes that's just not going to happen. But overall, are you still living your life in a way that is aligned with your values, that is, getting you closer to the goals that you've set for yourself, that are aligned with those values? So yeah, so I think particularly, when I heard you talking about shutting that part of the business down, I had the same reaction as you did, which was, do you know what? I think actually it's not bringing you what you wanted it to bring. So I think it's the right thing, and it's really hard to let go of. It's, as you say, the sunk cost fallacy. It's really hard to let go of work that you've put into it. It's really hard to let go of money that you've invested into it. But ultimately, it'll be more of a failure if you just kept going with it, right?
I really do believe that, and I think that's why I had to make the decision. I'd like to say I probably could have made it a little bit sooner, maybe a couple of months sooner, but I didn't really sit on it for too long. But then equally, I am also in a position where that's in my control. I can stop that. I can, there's been other times in my life where it's taken a long time to get out of a situation, or I've made the decision and I can't just change things overnight. I've got to kind of work towards it, especially loads of work stuff. I've had to, it's taken sometimes years to make the changes that I want to make. And I think that can be a reality too. And I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing either. That's probably a harder position in some ways, because you're not in control of making it happen straight away.
Yeah.
But potentially you can kind of do those kind of things, and you're kind of living with it for a long time as well. Like, you're working towards something, but it's going to take a while. And I think that can be really challenging as well. But I've definitely been in that position as well. When you think about failure, like, what's been not necessarily your biggest failure, because I don't know if it works like that, but have there been times where you've felt terrible in the middle of something?
Oh my God, yes, all the time. But I mean, there's definitely been particularly kind of big moments where, say, like if I think about it in the work context, there's definitely been roles that I've taken on in work, either whether it's consulting contracts or, jobs that I've done that just have not worked out at all. And definitely it's very hard not to think, God, that was a big mistake. That was a big failure. But pretty much everything I look back on now, I still think, yeah, but if I hadn't done that, I wouldn't have learned X, Y, and Z. I don't think there's anything that I've done in my career that I can't take something from in terms of a learning experience. And I think that really helps me to move forward from an experience like that. Like, there have been a couple of experiences that I've had in the workplace that have been very challenging for one reason or another. And, you know, it's definitely, it really, really helps to think about it instead of, you know, and we talk about this a lot as well, don't we? We talk about sort of the idea of an experimental mindset. It really helps me to think about it as, well, you know what, that was part of an experiment. That was part of the process that I was in to try and work out how I work best. What are the circumstances that I need to do the best work that I can do? Who are the people that I need to be working with? What does my working day look like? And you can't get to that unless you experiment with lots of different ways of working, working with different organizations, working with different people, working in different circumstances. And so even though some of those experiences might have felt like quote unquote failures, then, you know, actually now I look at them and go, no, they were all valid pieces of data, basically, that was going into, and, you know, and it's not that I certainly can't say now that I have everything sewn up and that I've set up the life and the work that, you know, that is ideal for me, because I'm still in that experiment for sure. But I'm okay with it, because like that, you know, look, we've even experienced it with this podcast. Maybe we should do an entire podcast on the podcast itself. But like, we have tried so many times to record. There have been tech failures. There have been, because I was sick for the last couple of weeks, we weren't able to record because of that. In life, there's always things that happen that, you know, that maybe lots of people don't see, but that actually you could classify technically as a failure. But actually, it's all just part and parcel of first of all, the reality of life, but also part and parcel of the learning experience. And I think, you know, since I learned really to look at life through that lens, to look at work particularly as well, and things that you're trying with work through that lens of experimenting, I just think it's really transformed the way I think about work. And I've really allowed myself to just, you know, I remember one year I decided that my my New Year's resolution was to let myself off the hook. And I meant that in this context, because I was like, I feel like I'm constantly just beating myself up about things that aren't going right, and actually let yourself off the hook, because even if things aren't going right, you're still learning something. So, and I think, you know, recently, I think first of all, it's really important to talk about failure in these terms really openly. And like, that's why podcasts like How to Fail are so popular. And Amy Edmondson, who talks a lot about psychological safety, she has a book also now about failure, which I think is it's been one of the biggest selling business books of the last year. I think people need to know that, you know, failure is totally normal. But recently I've seen a bit of a backlash on social media about it, you know, in terms of people saying things like, well, we shouldn't be talking about failure so much, because we should really be driving and striving for excellence, or we should be, you know, if we talk about failure, it's the flip side of it is that we expect perfection. And I don't know, I don't agree with that. I think personally we do need to talk about failure. I think clearly people do need to understand that failure happens, that, you know, whether it's on the like little minor level of a day-to-day, or, you know, in the bigger scale, like what you've experienced. And I really like, so I think part of the backlash on failure has been, you know, this whole like, Mark Zuckerberg's move fast and break things.
Yeah.
So it's been a bit.
I knew exactly what you were going to say then.
You could read my mind, couldn't you?
Yeah.
It's been a bit sort of like, you know, we all just have to like jump in and break things. This whole kind of slightly, if I may say, macho Silicon Valley type of culture. And I really liked the antithesis to that, which is Frances Fry. She's a Harvard business professor, and Anne Morris. They have a podcast and a book actually based on the same thing called, the book's called Move Fast and Fix Things. And I really like that because they still talk about they still talk about intelligent failure. They still talk about the fact that of course you're going to fail, but it moves it slightly, it shifts it slightly to, well, yeah, we can still move fast. We can still build an environment where we feel safe to talk about failure and we feel safe to admit that, things aren't always going right, but we're doing it intelligently. And our focus is on fixing things. Our focus is on making things better. Our focus is not on wrecking things, And I really, really like that as a little bit of a pushback to the glorification of failure. Because I don't think that's what we're saying either, is it? We're not saying that.
And it's not gamified. I feel like that whole Facebook thing is just like gamifying it. It's like, we've talked a little bit before about like everything becomes a productivity tool. Resilience becomes a productivity tool. Well-being becomes a productivity. It's basically just to achieve more, gain more, make things more profitable. And I kind of feel like I don't think we should be looking at getting through failure as quick as possible to get to that end, like to be as productive as we can be, or to be as profitable. If you're a business, you can be. I just don't like that approach, and I do get the pushback on that. I really do, and I feel like that's probably, especially, I just feel like it becomes quite dated after a while. So I think you're exactly right in that we should be talking about failure. That's why we're doing it, in my opinion.
I agree.
And particularly from a psychology standpoint as well, I think it's healthy that we talk about this. But I also feel like, we can talk about it in the grand scheme of trying to make things better, or trying to learn something, or seeing life as an experiment. And that experimental mindset, that idea has changed my life, like how I view. And actually, to be fair, I don't even know if I could talk about failure in the same way when it comes to me and my experiences if I didn't have an experimental mindset. Because I look at everything going into it as, this is an experiment. I don't know if it's going to work. And actually, there's kind of new stuff that is now kicking off that I've kind of been working on slowly, moving slow and fixing things over the summer. It's definitely not been quick.
That's okay too, by the way. I actually I will be here for the whole moving slow and fixing things thing as well. Definitely.
This is the next wave that we're proposing here.
Yeah.
Because I go into it thinking, I'm not going into it thinking, oh, this is definitely going to fail. Or I'm going into it saying, and I'm saying to everyone I talk to about it, I don't know if this is going to work or not. I don't know if this is the right way to go. But what I do know is what I was doing wasn't making me happy. So I'm going to try something. I'm going to test some stuff. It's pretty low risk. There's a lot of stuff that's already been created. I'm pretty much in control of this. There's less kind of bureaucracy. There wasn't really that much bureaucracy about it, but like, it's only, it's me, it's a marketing team. It's not like I've got someone who does. And what I will say, actually, I know I'm jumping around a little bit here, but what I will say is I've also found some great people to work with in the process over the last year. So Katie, who does my filming, has been amazing. That she's done stuff for us as well.
She's brilliant.
Debbie, photographer, she's amazing as well. They're a great duo. Jan, my web developer, I've been working with for years and years and years. Like, he's probably the one person that I've gone back to. Oh God, 10 years probably I've been working with him. Maybe not as much as that, but he's amazing. But I feel like it's helped me kind of build up a really great support system around me of people who help me work on this. I'm not employing, but I'll contract them for bits of work on this stuff. And I feel like if I didn't look at this like an experiment, and that means there's risk involved, it may not work. Firstly, I wouldn't be able to move forward. I'd probably be paralyzed and be like, oh, this is too scary, because I don't want to go out there saying this is the thing and this is going to work. But I'm not saying that. I'm saying I'm testing something. I don't know how it's going to go. And to be fair, I did do that with the Mindset Matters Hub as well, which probably allowed me the more freedom to call it quits when I wanted to. Because I'd gone into it talking about it as an experiment. I mean, I didn't totally get rid of everything that comes with that. But think about it, because I was thinking as well, when you were talking just then as well, I was thinking about parenting and how much of a failure I feel most weeks when it comes to parenting. I feel like I'm never getting things entirely right. I'd say most days I don't know what decision to make. I'm kind of making decisions about things. I'm like, oh, what are the implications of that? Because if we do that, then this could happen if I do that, that could happen. And we're talking, I'm talking tiny decisions here. When you're thinking about like shaping people's lives and helping them to be the best person they can be when they're older, and that huge, great big responsibility stuff that comes with parenting. Yeah. Whilst thinking about your needs and their needs and the whole family as a system and all of those things that are so hard to juggle and get your head around. I think even thinking about that as with an experimental mindset has made me such a better parent, and it probably hasn't improved my parenting skills because they're just as they are, but it stopped me being quite so harsh on myself, and it has probably made me a little bit more fun and a little bit less serious, which I can kind of, if I think about my household, I can definitely fall into the serious category of parenting, whereas Jake, my husband, definitely generally falls more into the fun side of things. But I think me taking the pressure off a little bit, you've got to have your boundaries. We need to do a whole session on boundaries as well.
Yeah.
And even, think about life. Think about people making investments, and you make an investment that's not so great, or you buy a car that isn't so great, or you end up buying a house in an area that, a few years later you don't like and you want to move. And those things can all feel like a failure. Or, you stay in a relationship too long, or, oh God, there's a whole multitude of things we could go through. But I think looking at everything as, I don't know the answers because I haven't done this before. Yeah. I haven't done it. I haven't finished this yet. I don't know what's going to happen, but I just want to test. And then the good thing about that as well, and thinking about it like an experiment, is you test something. So you test a little bit of it, see what works. That doesn't work, change direction, let go of it, do something new, tweak it. Yeah. That has been an absolute game changer for my life, for sure.
I think you're dead right about parenting, because if I think about when my first little boy was born and all I wanted was somebody to just hand me a list and a framework to tell me what to do, because I had no idea, obviously. And of course I didn't have any clue because I'd never done it before, And what I realize now is, no, and there, of course, they do exist. There's lots of books out there that tell you exactly how to parent, exactly how to deal with a newborn. But actually the reality is you are much better off just testing to see what works for you. And I agree. I think that does make me, it doesn't necessarily, I'm not sure it makes me a better parent, but it definitely makes me more at ease with the decisions that I make, and more at ease with, the wild chaos of all the day-to-day things that happen, because I think, okay, well, look, today hasn't been great, but actually I can learn from the things that happened. I remember, actually, I used to have a joke with a friend of mine when we did have newborns, and we used to basically just say at the end of the day, Control Alt Delete, And actually, I still use that in my head sometimes. Control Alt Delete. We need to just shut this down and start it back up again with a new hypothesis and a new idea for how we do things. And sometimes we do just need to close all of our tabs and close everything down and close and open it back up again. But I do think there's something in that, because honestly, nobody is getting this right. If they are, if somebody could let me know if they are getting it right, then write in and let us know, because I'd love to know how. But pretty much, especially with all the pressures of modern life between work and home, I don't think there's anyone out there who knows exactly how to do this. So the only way we can navigate it is by thinking of it all like an experiment, And if you think about the people who do that in their work are scientists and entrepreneurs. And, both of those careers are ones that are pretty well respected. So, if we take a scientific approach to living our lives, that's probably a good way forward, if you ask me.
Yeah, agreed. Totally agreed. So let's pull this together then. And so if we had to come up with, because we've said that there's no framework for this. So if we had to come up with some steps or some things to think about when you're navigating failure, where would we start? Where would you start? What would be your top things?
I think do what I said I don't do, or that sometimes I shy away from, which is, if you're in the middle of something that feels like a failure or that's not going right, try and be with that emotion. tune into it, recognize it, accept it. We know from all of the research in psychology that is absolutely an adaptive way to be when something's not going well, or if you feel an unpleasant emotion. It's definitely not a good idea to try and avoid it. Be with it. So that's the first thing, definitely. And, also it might help whilst you're doing that to remember that, there's probably billions of other people on the planet having that exact same feeling as you right now. So that might help. I think that's one thing. What might be next?
I really liked your suggestion of understanding what success is for you, because I feel like so often we're trying to achieve goals that aren't even our goals, or we're trying to achieve something in life that, if we sat back and thought about it, it probably doesn't suit our lives anyway. I really, because this could easily flip how you even think about failure sometimes, because sometimes, okay, maybe you are working towards a values-based goals. It's something that really means something to you, and you are working with your strengths, and it is really important, and you haven't quite hit it. And that's challenging. That's what we're talking about today. But equally, sometimes you might be working towards a goal that actually isn't even your goal. So it might not be that it's not even a failure anyway.
Totally.
Because that's not your dream, or that doesn't fit with your life. So I think I love this idea of defining your version of success. So think about what your values are, the stuff that's really, really important to you, how you want to live your life, what your beliefs are, what you value in others, or what's going on around you. So think about those things and set goals based on that. But also, exactly as you were saying as well, in this whole idea of, what is success for you, know what your strengths are. If we go back to my example, I wasn't playing to my strengths. I was doing a whole lot of meetings and managing a whole lot of this project and different people. Those are not my strengths at all. So get really clear on what your kind of success is. I think that's a really good tip. What else? So we've got experimental mindset. Oh, experimental mindset.
Yeah, that's a big one.
That is a big one.
Use an experimental mindset. Go in. I mean, you're obviously not going to go into absolutely everything in your life with an experimental mindset, because there are some things that you do know how to do and how to do them well. And so we're not suggesting that, throw absolutely everything, out the window. But I think especially, and especially right now, the world is so volatile, so changeable. Everything feels uncertain. Whether or not it is another question. But if you think about the things that are creating discomfort for you in your life, whether that's something that you're failing in, that you're perceiving to be failing in, or something in your work or in your home life that is just really challenging for you, just think about that as an experiment. Just think about it as, I'm going to test and adapt and see how that goes. And I just think that shift in mindset can really, really help to drive you forward a little bit, and helps you to take action, doesn't it? Because it allows you to go, okay, well, I don't know exactly how this is going to turn out, but I can take a little bit of action towards the next step. And that's also what it's all about as well, isn't it? Just taking action in some direction can really help propel you forward through a very difficult time.
And I think doing that without the expectation of it working, because we need to do a whole session on expectations as well. They are, I mean, if we could just remove that from life, that would be amazing.
Wouldn't it?
But if you're not expecting it to create the best result ever, you're taking the pressure off. And so it's forcing you to take action. That is experimental mindset. Just a small action, generally. It's just a small step normally. Try something, and it's not that expectation of it has to work. This has to be the end result. We're looking at, I'm going to see what happens. I'm going to take this action, and then I'm going to assess what happens, and then I'll adapt my behavior or actions based on what comes back. Which I think is a really healthy way to live.
One last thing actually that I was just thinking about there, that you wrote in a newsletter recently, which I really, really liked. And again, I'd love to do a whole discussion on this, which is, I think you said something about letting go of the win-lose mindset, or the win-lose approach to life, which I think is so true. I mean, if you think about like everything that happens in life and the way, we're socialized to think about winning versus losing, whereas the reality is in life, most things aren't about winning and losing. They're just about progress, or as you described in the example that you've given in this session, like in some respects, yes, you've lost some things, but actually you've gained a lot of other things as well. So, I think that's another thing to
And if I'd carried on going down the same path, I might have won in that it looks like I was right in making that bet on that business. So that could look like a win. But then I could have lost in relationships at home. I was getting more and more stressed. I was getting more and more unhappy. So we need. I think we do need to let go of the win-lose language. It is just progress, and it's experiencing life or the situation. It's not just this is what I need to do to win, because it's so black and white in that kind of thinking. And in reality, most of our life is lived somewhere in the middle. There are days where I feel like I have absolutely nailed something and I'm on top of the world. Think about those amazing deals that come through, or like, I don't know, like you just create something you're really proud of. Yes. But then, 10 seconds later, I feel like I've lost at something, which I probably have. Normally, I do actually physically lose quite a lot of things, like car keys and phones and that kind of things. That often costs me money to sort out. But you could have lost something else, I just think I do think we need to let go of that kind of mentality and language more than anything. Like language, how we talk to others about winning and losing, and language, mostly how we talk to ourselves in our heads as well.
Yeah.
I think the final thing that I would add is exactly as we've done in this session, talking about it. Now, I'm not saying you have to broadcast every single failure to every single person you know. Of course you don't have to. And we do have to think about protecting ourselves a little bit sometimes as well. So you probably do want that to be people you trust, and in a forum that feels right for you. But my biggest piece of advice, I guess, is start talking about this stuff with people you trust, who can be supportive as quickly as you can when you're going through it.
Have you heard about the vulnerability loop?
No, I haven't.
I love this. So basically, I love this idea. So maybe this is a nice place to end the podcast, but it's an idea, and I've forgotten who coined it now. It might have been in Dan Coyle's book about culture. But in it talks about how, when you're in a conversation with somebody, and if you disclose something about yourself that may be, a little bit of a failure or something that's hard for you, basically you put yourself out there and you're a bit vulnerable with that other person. What happens is that other person immediately reciprocates with something themselves as well, and it's a really nice way to build connection with somebody. And again, we're not talking about going into all of the back catalogue of failures of your entire life. It could just be about something silly that happened to you over the weekend. I was just walked down the street and I had a whole roll of toilet roll coming behind me, or whatever. It could be something silly. It can be something silly, but it can also be something quite serious and important to you. And the idea is that in this vulnerability loop, you build trust and connection. And so it's something that I often recommend when I'm talking with people who are in teams who are having a little bit of trouble connecting with people who are now distributed and, working virtually. The idea of the vulnerability loop is quite nice because, just to encourage people to kind of just show up as their human selves. It's not about, really disclosing absolutely everything, but it's just about, again, just disclosing those small little failures that we all know we have. And actually the outcome of that can be better human connection. And I think that's one big thing that we're all for in this podcast, aren't we?
We are. And I think that is the perfect place for us to think about pausing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Well, it's been wonderful talking to you about failure today, Gemma. But actually, I think I'm feeling very optimistic about failure. So
stay safe in the wild.
Stay safe in the wild.